Without further ado, we are again featuring today FenixOro Gold, which is a Toronto-based company formed in 2019 that is evaluating, acquiring, and exploring gold properties in Colombia. Specifically the Abriaqui project, which is about 100 kilometers northwest of Medellin. And if I'm right on this, John or Stu can correct me, but is about 16 kilometers from the Baridica project that Stu was instrumental on as VP of Exploration for Continental Gold, that was sold to Zinjin Mining last year, I believe, for $1.4 billion. So again, we have the CEO, John Carlesso, who I've known for about 17 years in the business, and the great Stu Muller, who was instrumental on the exploration of Baridica. And they are going to run through this presentation, which I think is fantastic. So without further ado, the great tandem of John Carlesso and Stu Muller.
I think we're paying these guys too much, John. We got three greats already.
No, thanks, Matt, very much. Pleasure to be, presenting with you again. Matt is one of the originals in our industry, and it's always fun and informative to be involved with him. So just as a way of introduction, or to clarify, what's the preferred time frame here? Like 30 minutes?
I say, John, yeah, our typical is 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, and then Q&A
okay.
in that. So we'll just play it through, but we're scheduled for 1 to 2. Okay,
that's great. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our story. Thanks for having an interest. We are located in Colombia, and I'm going to assume, we'll assume that you know little about Colombia, and then just give you some of the highlights. We are located on, and Stu is give you an overview. Stu will give you a lot more detail in terms of the geology. We're located on what has now become one of the most prolific gold belts in the world for new discoveries in the past 12 years or so. The Mid-Cauca gold belt, as it is known, is responsible for almost 100 million ounces of new discoveries since 2007. That includes Baridica, it includes Gramalote, which is now a B2 Anglo project, and includes La Colosa, a number of names. Stu will run you through some of those details. We are at the northern end. We're the closest project to Baridica, about 15 kilometers to the west, as Matt mentioned. And this is not just a story about closeology. There are a number of, Stu will tell you, eerie similarities that we're seeing. I won't spoil his thunder, but we believe we are part of this same system, and it's starting to get really, really interesting with some of the work that we've been doing in our early stage exploration program. Stu, as Matt indicated, he is the guy in Colombia. I've known him for about the same time, a little longer than I know you, Matt. Stu and I met in Bolivia, going back to 2001. I believe he was senior VP, head of exploration for Pan American Silver. Prior to that, he worked with Barrick, and then became VP exploration with Continental Gold, actually, when it was still private. So he's responsible for the discovery, drilled about the first 300 holes. But more than that, he knows as much, if not more, than anybody on the planet when it comes to Baridica. But his database of Colombia really is quite impressive as well. He's worked on projects that have generated public companies, as I said, by B2, by Cordoba, which is one you may have heard of. This is going back to last cycle, Calvista and Solvista, certainly Continental Gold. IM Gold has gone public with one, or taken one of these, acquired one of the projects through acquisition. So his database is extensive. we have an exciting story to tell you that I think not only is it the Baridica style story, but we've got a couple of other really interesting and exciting things on the go there. With respect to, or why Colombia, I mean, it's always been, oh, there's two. It's always been, I think, certainly prolific in terms of gold exploration. You've probably all watched an episode, or if you're like me, you've binged it several times, several seasons of Narcos. So we're familiar with the history. Footnote there is that was 30 to 40 years ago. Colombia is not like that today. But the flip side of it is, during that period of time, during of turmoil, there really was not a lot going on in Colombia with respect to mineral exploration. So relative to other countries in South America today, it is underexplored. So hence you have, for us, that means opportunity. It's a low cost jurisdiction. Security is great. The people are wonderful. There is a $25 billion national infrastructure program that's been underway for several years now. It is basically around logistics. It's bridges, tunnels, highways, road expansion, all meant to make getting around Colombia, getting in, over, and through the Andes much more efficient. And that's going to drive operating costs lower for players in the resource industry like ourselves. Like just about every other country on the planet, it has been impacted by COVID. In Colombia, it seems to be centered mostly in Bogota, which is the capital and largest city. It's about the size of New York. We're not anywhere near there, and we've been fortunate enough in that the area that we're operating in the state of Antioquia, north of Medellin, there have been very few cases. They had a handful in and around our project location a few weeks ago. Those have all cleared up. So we've essentially been able to work pretty much uninterrupted since the outbreak in March. There was a couple weeks when everything shut down initially. Colombia has taken an approach that mineral industries are exempt from operating restrictions and have been deemed essential industries. Each jurisdiction has the ability, each locality, municipality has the ability to designate their own essential industries. And we've been fortunate to have some great support from the local mayor and the local community. They've deemed us as essential, so we've been able to continue working in that during this time frame. So with that, I will turn it over to Stu, and he'll walk you through where we are, what we're doing, and what we're finding.
Okay, hi you guys. I'm assuming we're not a really technically geologically advanced crowd, so I'll play to that least common denominator. And if I'm too slow, then give me a shout, and I can certainly tech it up for anybody who requires. The map on the right on this slide is it's geological, but let's start with the geographical part. You see Medellin in the center. The dashed red line is the Pan American Highway, sort of Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, the Colombia segment. It's currently undergoing part of this $25 billion infrastructure upgrade. Currently, because of the construction, it's sort of a windy, curvy, switchback, two-lane road through the mountains. But within 2 years, when they get finished, it's going to be an hour and 20 minutes to the project, about half of which is underground in tunnels. Just a spectacular building program, and the above ground part will be 4 lanes. You can see 2/3 of the way from Medellin out to our project at Abriaqui, we have Baridica. Those of you who are familiar with Colombia Gold Investments, I'm sure have heard the name. John introduced it. Well, actually, there's going to be a tunnel. We'll even see Baridica on the way out. But we're just close enough to that highway where, as the next slide shows, we're about 4 kilometers away to be able to enjoy the infrastructure and all the power and water and manpower infrastructure that comes with close proximity to basically the main road artery in the country. But we're not too close. There's a mountain in between the two of us, and that's fine with me because we can do what we do without undue criticism from the casual observer on his way to the beach. Looking at the three color bands, sort of north-northwest trending color bands, there are different ages of intrusive rocks, different belts of intrusive rocks that are associated with gold and gold-copper mineralization in this part of Colombia. We're interested in the yellow band and then the red band. If we extended this map a bit to the further to the south, we would cover the full 200 kilometers of the yellow and red bands, which combined, as John mentioned, have given rise to almost 100 million ounces of new discoveries since 2007. And many of these, actually most of those ounces, are in world-class discoveries, 20 million plus ounce discoveries. Baridica currently has 11 million ounces in all categories on their books, but they haven't bothered to do a resource calculation because they knew they were going to sell. And once the Chinese bought, there's a total blackout of news, no press releases, nothing technical. But my geological contacts say 20 million ounces is in the bag. So we'll be referring to incredible geological similarities with Baridica. Remember, we're comparing us at Abriaqui to a true world-class discovery. John, you're controlling the slides, are you not? Yep. There we go. Here's a Google Earth image that I put in for several reasons. Note the 1 kilometer scale. One of the reasons for this wacko orientation with north to the bottom left is so I could show a little bit of the Pan American Highway, the old switchbacky part. Actually, the new tunnel will actually be under the yellow north arrow and will come out off the screen. Basically, we're all contained within one valley between elevations of 2,800 meters and about 1,800 meters. Those of you who know Colombia may be aware that there's some restrictions on development above 3,200 meter elevation throughout the country. We have no issues with that. I've also plotted all the various veins. This is basically a vein deposit in which we've discovered a couple new styles of mineralization while exploring for the veins. But I just wanted to show, again, note the scale. There's a bit of distortion on the scale because this is at an angle. But basically, it's two areas of very tightly packed, very high grade veins. On which we will begin the exploration and development. Actually, we have begun the exploration already. Guess we can go to the next slide, John. Okay, here north is back to up map view. You can see our land position on the map. The geological units are exactly the same as the geological units at Baridica. The green unit is sort of a regionally developed package of sedimentary rocks into which both at Baridica and where we are, the pink units, which are intrusive rocks, diorite category intrusive rocks, have been emplaced. And the emplacement of these intrusive bodies basically brings its own gold-bearing juices along with it, and depending on local characteristics. And this is true up and down this 200-kilometer trend. We're looking at different variations on the theme, exposed at different levels of erosion vertically, different sizes, different grades. Not much copper here. This is pretty much a gold-only one. But these are all variations on a theme that I've been looking at up and down that trend for 12 years. Here, most of the gold that we found to date is manifested in this sequence of veins, shown as the red lines. If you look closely, you'll notice that just about every one of the veins that we have on this map, which is probably 80% of the ones that we've found to date, are accompanied by a little mining symbol. There's a legally established small miners association here, licensed and monitored, environmentally monitored, running about 30 small water-driven, basically water wheel gravity separation gold plants using no chemicals at all. These guys have been here. This is the third generation that they've been there. They've been there over 80 years. They are our partners in this venture. Which is good, number one, because we have a real sweet deal with them. We control four licenses, actually 3 licenses in an application. 2 of those licenses, 2 of the 3 with the most mineralization on them, are the underlying owner is Aso Minerales, this small miners group. So with a very modest work commitment, I think 1.6 million more, which we'll do in the first year easily once we start drilling. And we own basically everything you're looking at, 90%. One of the 4 licenses, 100%. And these guys are basically subsistence miners. So I guarantee that that assuming that we're in development mode and we have access to all the cash, we're just going to make them a cash offer for that remaining 10%, and I'd be real surprised if they said no to that. So functionally, at least 90% interest is basically attainable easily, and hopefully 100%. So anyway, they found most of these veins for us over the last 80 years through a sequence of small mines. There are no big ones. Typically, it's an adit in the side of a mountain, steep country, as we saw in the Google Earth image, and they go in horizontally, and I don't think any of them has been worked more than about 20 or 30 meters vertically. Again, in heavily vegetated mountainous terrain, not a lot of rock outcrop. It's been really instrumental in getting us started on the exploration. We've taken it the next level, as I'll show in the next couple slides, to sort of see through that cover, and have made some really interesting discoveries in addition to what you see here. John, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, here's a comparison slide with Baridica. Size and scale, and basically the 3D characteristics of the 2 systems. When I got to Baridica, there were 4 or 5 small mines, 6 or 7 known veins, no drill holes. This was 2007. Now, after about 250, 300,000 meters of drilling, the inset photo, which is Baridica, has identified all those individual veins, which are in the sort of the army green color. Within that box, which is again at the same scale as the underlay, which is our prospect, the same scale, they have 11 million ounces, and any geo who's worked there would say 20 million ounce potential within that box. And that box, sort of in east-west, north-south dimensions, is smaller actually than sort of the 2 main areas of veins that we have. The vein density, the vein spacing is very similar. And we are so much farther advanced on this prospect of ours at the pre-drill stage than we were back then at Baridica. And plus the real ace in the hole that we have is the precedent of Baridica. We know what this means. We know what the geological characteristics we're seeing can lead to. So that's really helpful. The main reason that Baridica has so many ounces in such a small box is the 3rd dimension. They have about 1,200 vertical meters of veins, continuous from top to bottom, at high grades from top to bottom. And so your XY map direction is important, but it's the Z direction, the vertical definition, which really gives it the ounce potential. We have not drilled a single drill hole, but we know that we have at least 900 vertical meters. As you'll remember, on the Google Earth image, I mentioned that the top is about 2,800 meters. Okay, John's pointing to it. And then down in the bottom of the valley, the same veins at the same high grades are outcropping at about 900 vertical meters, 900 to 1,900 to 2,000. So we've got at least 900 vertical meters of vein continuity at high grade that we can demonstrate without drilling a single meter. Plus, once we start drilling, which will be in the topographically lower part, I guarantee that we'll be able to add to that 900 vertical meters. And these are deep-seated veins related to a porphyry gold system. And the principal characteristic of that type of veins here at Baridica and everywhere in the world is that you don't get a lot of geochemical or grade differences from top to bottom. So we have no reason to believe that once we start drilling, we're going to lose the gold, or it's going to turn to copper, or anything like that's going to happen at depth. So we're real confident about that, thanks to my 40 years in the business, but also to my experience with Baridica. Next slide, please, John. Okay, this is the same map, the map inlay. I just plotted the assays that we have on there, the gold assays. You don't really need to worry about the detail. Just concentrate on the distribution of the purple circles, which are the veins that have assayed, or the individual samples in veins which have assayed at least 20 grams per ton up to 146. And we have those over the full vertical range from 2,800 meters in the southeastern part of the property down to below 2,000 meters in the northwest. We're not losing any gold. Gold-silver ratios, gold-copper ratios, nothing is changing geochemically. What we see is what we've got and what we're going to continue to get at depth when we start drilling. One of the real ounce builders at Baridica is the fact that it's swarms of veins, meters to tens of meters apart, but in between, in several areas, they've developed what they call their broad mineral zones, where they're sort of tying these high-grade veins together in bulk underground mineable units, because the interstitial material goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 grams in some cases of gold, which passes their economic sort of cutoff, their underground cutoff grade, which is currently at 3, but my sources tell me they could easily drop that to 2 grams. Now, if you look at the two inset photos, basically the lower inset photo is, these inset photos are at our project at Abriaqui. It's sort of a veinlet stockwork with a little bit of pyrite in it and lower grade gold, 1 to 5 gram gold. And we've seen many outcrops of that in between the veins. The miners didn't develop any of it because it's low grade and they've got to feed their kids, so they don't concentrate on the lower grade stuff. But if you look at the upper grade, the upper inset photo, you can see 1, 2, 3 veins that have actually been developed by the small miners. Everything else in that photo assays at least 2 grams. I'd say 2 to 5. The material adjacent to the veins and in between the veins. So this is an Abriaqui example of the excellent potential which we've seen in several places for this sort of broad mineral zone, where we'll have theoretically half a dozen veins, and in between them low but not too low grade material that we can bulk underground mine. We're really not anticipating any sort of open pit mine here. Obviously, we'll follow our noses on that. We'll get what we get, and the engineers will decide what makes the best sense to dig it up. But looking at the Baridica precedent, they're going to be mining these bulk mineralized zones underground at up to 40-meter widths, and we have excellent potential for that in several areas. We have 2 other styles of mineralization. Why don't we go back? Actually, any of these slides works with this discussion. Yep.
I have just a quick question from the audience. And this is from Leonard Harris, who is a former VP and general manager of Newmont, Latin America. Everybody
knows Len.
Okay, then you know Len.
Well, I'm sitting in Reno right now, so everybody in Reno knows Len. Anyway.
There you go. Len's question was, can you give me more detail on how the ore will be processed?
Well, first of all, let's get some ore. But again, looking back, well, actually, we have 2 sources of information on that. The small miners right now are 100% gravity separation. They've got these beautiful little gravity mills. And again, they're not throwing any cyanide or any mercury on it. They would if their environmental permit allowed them to, because they're Colombians after all. But I doubt that they're getting better than about 30% recovery. One of our guys lost his mind. Well, one of our workers is working for us because he lost his mind, but he still has his mill. And he said, yeah, I'm still making gold. We said, how do you do that? If you don't have any new mill feed? He said, oh, I just keep rerunning my tails. Oh, doesn't that knock the hell out of your recovery? And he said, no, I get about the same recovery every time. So this is in the vein scenario. It's pretty much free gold. And again, harkening back to Baridica, Baridica actually toyed with the idea after hundreds of thousands of dollars of metallurgical work of going 100% gravity separation. And that deposit, they're hoping to get about 80% of the gold just in a fairly sophisticated multi-phase gravity separation. Free gold, not complexed with much of anything. They're actually going to throw some cyanide on the tails and get another 10% or so. I think their current recovery figure that they're quoting with not a very sophisticated routine at all is about 96%. So we haven't done any metallurgical tests, but we're sure that it's gonna be good, it's gonna be easy, and it'll be gravity dominated, at least in the vein scenario. We haven't talked about manto and porphyry yet, which are the two other mines. But thanks for that question, Len. That's a good one. I hope we have to worry a whole lot in the future about metallurgy, because it means that we've got something worth worrying about.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so anyway, sort of right in the middle of the northwestern vein swarm, I was walking along a creek and I saw some veins that didn't look like the others. A lot of magnetite, a magnetic mineral, and some potassium feldspar. And that's pretty typical with the kind of veinlets that were there of the mineralized zone of a style of mineralization called porphyry mineralization. Those of you who know the game will be familiar with that. It's huge, I mean, hundreds of millions of tons of low grade. Along this trend in Colombia, there are several of them which have been proven to be economic, some with some copper, some others not. But the good ones have about 1 gram of gold per ton. But they're bulk mineable, either underground or much more generally in an open pit scenario. So you can afford, because you're mining 40,000 tons a day, you can, the economies of scale allow that 1 gram material to be economic. But all these things up and down the trend, depending on the depth of erosion, basically they're driven by a porphyry style system. And then in the case of Baridica, and in our case here, you've got a kilometer or more vertically of veins that are developed laterally and up above the porphyry horizon. So the porphyry is going to be deep. We are lucky here, due to just the accidents of erosion, to be able to see, as I mentioned, we can demonstrate almost 1 kilometer of veins. But down in this deep valley, just this little cupola, the very top, I'm modeling it as the top of the porphyry system. We're not there yet. We still need to stick a drill hole in it. But I mean, we've got a little over 1 gram per ton in this zone of what's called potassic alteration, which is typical of the mineralized part of a porphyry system. Just one little set of outcrops. It's just peeking through the surface in the topographically lowest part of the district. If you're watching our press releases, within a few days, hopefully, we will have a press release based on geophysics, on magnetometry, which will add to this story. Shows that's what we're modeling as porphyry style mineralization. If indeed it is, it continues to significant depth in the middle of this system. Also in the green unit, immediately adjacent to the pink unit, which is the diorite, the intrusive bringer of the mineralization. We have some replacement style mineralization in the sediments. We don't know what the grade is very much. We're just in the process of sampling them now. But this style of mineral, it's mineralized sedimentary beds. And the one place where we've seen it, it's up to 25 meters thick. And we've gotten individual samples as high as 4 grams out of it. That's going to be an assay cutoff. We have to do a lot of assay work on that, a lot of sampling. But it's way up on top of the mountain. It's not something we're going to be able to drill in the short term. So that's just extra gravy. That's just extra fantasy value. We don't need the porphyry. We don't need the manto style mineralization, the replacement mineralization to make it here. We don't feel, because the vein story is so high grade, so widespread, and as I'm sure we'll find with the very first drill hole, so deeply seated. So but it's just gravy. I mean, and they don't have the porphyry horizon at Baridica because they're exposed at a higher level of erosion. Their porphyry, when they find it, and everyone's convinced that they will probably be 1,500 meters below surface and will probably not be economic at that depth. Why don't we go to the next one, John? Okay, so we've done some geophysics looking for the basically porphyry hunting. We've also done a bunch of soil sampling. If you look at the insets here, you can see that the map on the left is sort of a subgrid based on the northern or the northwestern swarm of veins. The map on the east is the southeastern one. Basically, the individual dots that are aligned on this northeast-southwest pattern are a grid of samples that we took of soils. Remember, this is heavily vegetated, and where it's not heavily vegetated, down in the valleys, it's got deep soil cover. So there's very little outcrop here. So I mentioned it's only thanks to 3 generations of small miners that we've realized there are more than 80 veins here. So we're looking for some new ones. Basically, what we found, especially in the main vein zone on the left, is that between the families, the east-west and northwest trending families of tightly spaced veins, almost all the ground is equally anomalous in soils. Normally, you'd expect to get some high grade, gold grade in soil samples right above known mineralization, i.e. right above the known veins. We did, but if you look at the pattern, and it's a sort of a rainbow color, the red, orange, and yellow are the higher grade golds. And you see all the areas where there are no map veins, in between those main families of veins, we're getting exactly the same magnitude of gold in the soils, which indicates to me that the veins are a lot more widespread and probably a lot more densely grouped together than the small miners and our early geologic mapping efforts have been able to come up with, thanks to this secondary technique, the soil sampling technique. John, why don't you go to the next slide because it plays nicely. Okay, good. Back to our standard inlay. Basically, we've changed this drill pattern 100 times and we'll change it 100 times more. But basically, this shows the main philosophy of the drilling. The yellow circles are going to be drill pads, and the yellow tails coming off of them are the surface projection of angled drill holes. So if you look at the underlay at A prime, looking at a vertical section there, looking to the northwest, which is what we have in the inset, those angled drill holes, which I show in the black on the inset, will cut at angles. They'll cut all of these veins, which are mostly steeply dipping, which is helpful. Basically, on the inset, I plotted just the known veins. So these first two holes are each going to hit, what, half a dozen veins, 6 or 8 veins, known veins. Looking now at the infilling of the soil anomalies, I think it's highly likely that those holes and pretty much all the others are going to hit at least twice that many veins, plus any of this interstitial lower grade material in between. So I, needless to say, cannot wait for that first drill hole to come out of the hole, because it's going to be a Baridica style, 2008 Baridica style adrenaline rush. I can taste it. And I ain't a kid. You can see me in the photo. I've been doing this for 40 years, and I didn't think I would be getting this excited again at age 67 at a pre-drill stage, but I am. I'm an exploration guy. We're the eternal optimist, but this is going to work. This is going to work. I think the question is how many veins, how do they hold together, what are the grades going to be, and then hopefully very early we turn it over to the engineers and hope they don't screw it up. That's about all I have other than questions. Certainly, I'll leave some time for John and certainly plenty of time for any.
I mean, do you want to, Matt? Do you want to deal with some geological questions now while it's fresh, if there are any?
We can, John. Is there more to the presentation?
A couple slides about sort of capital structure and that sort of thing. We can run through that quickly.
Let's dive into that, and then we'll open it up.
Yeah. a little bit of background. We went public in May of this year. We merged with a shell called American Battery Metals. That and the appeal. I mean, if you guys think back to when we put the deal together, it was kind of mid-February, and it seems like a lifetime ago now. But at that time, and I know Matt, you and I were talking kind of November, December, January, in that time frame. It was a very different market than today. Gold was still, I want to say, stuck around 1,500 or so. The gold equities market had not really taken off. We were just finishing a private round, and it was tough. I mean, there was certainly, we were getting interest, but I would say our biggest objection was, or biggest feedback, consistent feedback was, you guys have a really interesting story. There's obviously, you've got something very, very exciting with a lot of potential. I'd love to see you public. I'd love to see you, be closer to a drill ready phase. So, it was tough to raise money in public markets as a private company. So we did a deal with American Battery. American Battery had 1.5 million in cash and $3.5 million in unexercised in the money warrants. So for us, we thought that was a pretty good looking scenario, in the sense that in that type of market, we were not going to be beholden to being forced to go raise money periodically or continually to survive. So we were looking at a structure that would provide us with about 5 million in cash. You can see there the fully funded 24-month exploration program is 2.9 US. The 1.6 gets us over 36 months, gets us to the 90% range on the 2 of the 4 claims that we don't own outright. And as Stu mentioned, I mean, the reality is we're going to spend that much in 12 months, so it's not going to be a question of whether we complete the earn-in. There is some optionality for a small production facility to keep the local miners busy, and we are kind of in a bit of acquisition mode, looking at ways we can perhaps expand our footprint in the area. We've kind of gone over. I think you've gotten to know who Stu is. Matt and I, when I first met, I think on our certainly my first road trip with him, and back in, I want to say 02, 03, I was with a company called Desert Sun Mining. That was a restart of an old Anglo operation in Brazil. We had a lot of success. It was sold to Yamana for 750 million in 07, I want to say. And working with a fellow named Stan Barty, who some of you may have come across. Stan is a pretty prolific deal maker. Has had a number of very large successes. I would say the value of being there at that particular time was that it was still a very small shop. Desert Sun was really the first deal to come out of our office, and I got to work very closely with a number of very experienced guys. Our CEO was a guy named Bruce Humphrey. Bruce had been the chief operating officer at the Red Lake mine for Gold Corp prior to coming to Desert Sun. Bill Pearson was our VP exploration. Bill was one of the fellows who actually wrote the National Instrument 43101 regulations for the TSX, which really kind of governs the industry today. And a fellow named Peter Tagliamonte was the chief of operations at the mine in down in Brazil, and Peter's gone on to run a number of very successful companies and mining operations. So it was a great kind of hand mining MBA for me. And my career has always been really focused in Latin America. We did a gold copper play in Chile that we took public shortly after that. That was acquired by a Chilean public company. So we've got a good team. In terms of other directors, Keith Minty is a very experienced mining engineer. He was the Northern Miners Man of the Year a few years back. He's worked all over the world. To address one of the earlier questions, he'll be a guy that we'll be leaning on pretty heavily when we start to try to figure out how we might operate, what our cost structure might look like from a mining perspective. And David Mitchell is an independent director who has been a capital markets professional for virtually his entire career. So we're in good hands there. I won't dwell too much on the comp tables. I would say, in this list, I find Fosterville South really interesting. Not so much, there isn't a lot of geological similarity. They're in Australia, but I think the narrative is an interesting one. Fosterville is certainly a very well-known mine, certainly in Canada. It was acquired by Kirkland Lake Gold and is probably responsible for most of their grade and most of their cash flow. So Fosterville South was started up by, and forgive me, I forget the fellow's name, the gentleman who discovered Fosterville, acquired a land package next door to it that he thought had a lot of similarities, geological similarities. Wasn't that it was just next door. Put the package together, put a bit of financing, and they're basically looking at developing a look-alike to Fosterville, and they've had some success, some drill success, and so I think their market cap is around 200 million right now. They started out looking very similar to us, so that's kind of the model that we aspire to follow. A little bit of our stock price. I think today we closed around 41 cents US and 55 Canadian. You'll see the cap table there. We still have about an additional 1.8, I'm going to say, cash available to us through the exercise of outstanding warrants. They're fairly tightly held, so they're in friendly hands. We do have the ability to call on it when we need it. It's not really a necessity today, given our cash balance that you see there. So we're in good shape. We're in good shape to fund the program, to call on some of these warrants, to if we end up deciding we want to drill a few more holes. Stu tells me that he's already has an inkling that that's going to be the case, and I think we're on the cusp of, as I said, as we're developing this exploration program. We've got a lot of results coming in from work that we've been doing over the last several months, so it's going to be an exciting time moving forward. There is an appendix with a couple of slides geologically. Stu, I don't know if you want to touch on either of these.
Well, actually, yeah. This one. I don't know what the
Okay.
gray on pink is in the middle, but this is just a little cartoon of the 3 deposit models. It's to scale. The vertical scale certainly is real, but you can see where I'm coming up with this minimum 800 vertical meters of vein outcrop from the top of the hill, where we see it up high down to the bottom, and I have question marks as to how deep it goes, but it's going to continue. And right where that pink body with the crosses on it just barely nicks the surface is where we're seeing that 1 gram per ton mineralized stuff in the kind of alteration that is normally associated with porphyries. The geophysics bears out, this was drawn pre-geophysics. The geophysics has borne out that model in that there is a magnetic body right where I'm putting that pink thing. The first drill hole will tell us whether that's porphyry style mineralization, but this holds up really well. And then we have the manto style mineralization, and again, that's to scale. That's about 25 meters thick, off in the sediments in the green unit at the top of the hill. So those are basically the three mineralization styles that we're in 2 cases we're looking at, and in the case of the porphyry that we're pretty sure we're looking at, sort of thrown into one sort of semi-schematic diagram. That's
a quick question here.
Sure.
If you were to guess on a resource estimate with Continental at 11 million ounces, where do you see Abriaqui going?
Well, I mean, it's so easy to do mine planning before you drill your first drill hole. So let's assume we make the discovery. I mean, we know we're going to hit high grade in many different veins. It's and we've got $2,000 gold. Remember that 11 million ounces. That resource calculation was done at least 3 years ago, and so assuming that we have a high gold price, that's going to bring all of this lower grade interstitial material into play. It's going to be well, if an engineer did a mine model today, I don't know what they'd use, probably $1,800. You can't really use all-time gold highs in your modeling. Well, sure you can if you're a geologist, but not if you're an engineer. But basically, just looking at the Baridica comparison, looking at the density and spacing of the veins and the kinds of models, I mean, multi-million ounce is certainly a very real possibility. I just can't, before we do any drilling, I just can't, can't quantify that anymore. If that first drill hole that drills one of those families of veins, plus a couple of these soil anomalies where we currently have no veins, and it intersects 30 veins where we were only projecting 5 or 6, then ask me again then.
There you go.
And, hopefully we're not too far away from that point in time. Our permits, which have been, oh God, we didn't talk about that, but we're on the cusp of getting our drill permits. The reason they've taken so long to get is because we were just about to get them in March when COVID shut the country down. All the government ministries who were making these kinds of decisions were, I mean, we piss and moan here in the States about the inconveniences of COVID shutdown. We don't know anything about what it was like until you get to Colombia, especially Bogota, which John mentioned is the first part. But they finally started to open up, and we've been told to expect our permits very soon.
Which kind of dovetails into another question here from one of our attendees, Ron. Colombia has problems, including central government issues, Venezuela, a ministry of mines that is constantly in turnover mode, a very leftist mayor of Medellin. FenixOro needs permitting in a forest reserve. The overhanging Colombian issues suggest great difficulties and long timeline in getting just the permitting, much less water in other permits. Can you, again, just extrapolate, I think, on where
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly where we were back in November when we began the permitting process.
Let me start, Stu. I want to clarify something first before we go. It's not a forest reserve. People use that term, but it's not a forest reserve. I'll just state that out, right? That's it's incorrect terminology and an assumption. But there are several precedents. And in fact, there is a permitted mine adjacent to one of our claims, and both exploration and exploitation licenses that have been granted in some claims that are adjacent to our property. So it's certainly not precedent where we are located that this kind of activity can go on. So to me, that's the most important point, but Stu, I'll let you go.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are 2 permits we need to get. We do need to do what's called a sustraction, where you basically extract a chunk of this, not forest reserve. Back in the 50s, they knew they were going to want to protect some Colombian forests. So they took about 1/3 of the country out of play for any kind of development without doing any environmental studies. Basically, just as this great font of land from which, when they had time and money to do those studies, they would start coming up with national forests and things. Since that time, there's a very well-established mechanism, this sustraction mechanism, to take pieces out of that based on studies for various development purposes. La Colosa, Anglo's big mine on the south end of this 200-kilometer trend, was a good example. They successfully did their sustraction. We started that paperwork in November. That's the federal one. We just talked to them recently and have reason to believe that is definitely going to happen in the short term. But that's not the legally binding permit. I mean, the permit that you need to legally start drilling is a water use permit, which is given to you by the much more hard-bitten, data-driven, prove to me that your project merits this type of regional semi-autonomous environmental agency. They have done all their work. They've done their field visit. They told us next week we've got that. So we're probably going to get that one, the tough one, before we get the federal one, which is basically a rubber stamp. And so we don't have until we have them, but we have every reason to believe, from talking to all the right people and having all the right politicians, regional, local, and national, who are very much in favor of this project, supporting all these various applications. We very much hope to be drilling in September. We have negotiated and we're we're crossing the final T's and dotting the final I's on the drill contract with the, with the drill contractor. We're that optimistic that this is going to happen.
I would say it's it's a fair criticism to say that Colombia, I guess this is the other side of the coin with respect to it being underdeveloped relatively to countries like Mexico or Chile, is that they have been, I think, fairly criticized in the past for being slow on permitting. I think over the past few years they've been attempting to rectify that with some enhanced communication between the mining ministries and the environmental ministries to ensure that they're both looking at things simultaneously and to try and make the process more efficient. Certainly within Antioquia where we are, Medellin, we have nothing to do with Medellin, but in the province, the governor is certainly a pro-business, very resource friendly governor. I believe he's a mining engineer. The current minister of mines, funnily enough, his wife is from the town of Abriaqui, and we just found this out I think about a month ago. We didn't even realize this. He is one of the founding partners of Aso Mineralis, which is our local partner that owns that will result with a 10% interest in the projects when we're finished with the claims. The congressional representative for the area that we are in is actually the leader of the lower house in Colombia, the leader of Congress. So all of these, and I would say the mayor has a large role to play in this. He's probably our largest champion, loudest champion as well for this. So we feel we've got some stars aligned here politically, certainly. Hopefully that gives you a good flavor.
What about FARC, guys? Is that where is that whole situation? I just know from a generalist situation, is someone is an American, and going back to Escobar and all of that, and then going through the 90s and what have you. Is that an issue anymore, or is that just kind of an extinguished threat?
I mean, there was a peace treaty a couple of years ago. I was in Medellin actually. They took the vote, and it was, interestingly, it literally was a tie. It was as close as you can be to one. It was kind of 50-50 on the referendum on this peace treaty. But for the most part, I mean, where it does exist, and I think the reality is. This has always been sort of somewhat of a fact of life in many Latin American countries, but within Colombia, where it does exist today, it's been pushed out towards the Venezuelan border, and in the south towards the Ecuadorian border, really out in much more remote and type of overgrown jungle areas where they can operate a little more undetected. I think the FARC is, I mean, from a populist standpoint, they are trying to refashion themselves as a political party, and really, try and change some entities of the government system there. So you do see this, I don't want to say polar opposites, but you can be having conversations with people that are within any group. There's going to be left and right on any number of topics. So that's my takes too. You probably got some thoughts as well.
Kind of like the IRA in Ireland, yeah. Just a kind of a terrorist organization that fashions itself now as a more sophisticated political arm within the country.
Yeah, that's kind of true. I guess that's a fair comparison. But the fact of the matter is, even back during the bad old days, this particular area was never bad. Yeah. There are no guerrilla leaders or ex-guerrilla leaders who have family who still live in the area because they really weren't in this area. It's again, being 4 kilometers from the Pan American Highway, the fundamental artery, a road artery in the country, has its advantages. They have kept those corridors, maybe 20 kilometers on either side, very, very clean. Certainly ever since I arrived in the country in 2007. I was here when, we were tripping over landmines on one of the Continental properties, and there were still kidnappings and things. It's night and day between that time when Baridica was discovered and developed, and all these other big deposits, and now. So I don't think my wife even worries about me anymore.
Any majors operating down there, guys, or no?
Newmont was all scheduled to buy Baridica. They had their engineers there. Actually, it was the Newmont engineering crew that had been working, putting together mine plans and mining plans, and this Chinese company came in and bid, I guess, about the same dollar amount, but all in cash. And there was great disappointment from everybody, certainly Newmont, but Newmont by that time had a good chunk of shares, so they made some money on it. I'm sure they would have much preferred whatever the 300,000 ounces at $600 cash all in production. Expand that over 20 million ounces. It certainly would have been a great deposit for them, but they were there. But Anglo Gold is the main one. They were in even before I was, and they've reaped the benefits. They've got 2 world-class deposits that have come out of their work. 3 actually. One of them probably won't get developed. So
Two is there as well. And in fact, it seems that they are kind of refocusing more on Colombia, using their Gramalote deposit as a maybe a bit of a flagship, but I know that they are kind of hunting for other assets. And we're seeing a lot of Australian juniors come to Colombia as well, just as a point of interest.
So we got one last question from the audience before we wrap. FARC is still a threat in Continental's Berlin property. How close is the Berlin?
That's where we were tripping through the landmines. It's actually, it's not FARC. The FARC is done. They're the political party now. The sort of the one rebel group that never came to terms is the ELN. Yes and no. They had a horrific incident, which never should have happened. It was complete stupidity on the part of the exploration crew at Continental Gold, but it did happen, showing that it could happen. This was 3 or 4 years ago. That's probably 130 kilometers to the northeast as the crow flies. Okay. But that has always been a hot spot. Always been a hot spot there. So it's not directly comparable to our situation.
Great. Well, I think that does it for our time today. Great presentation by Stu and John. Really appreciate your time today, and everyone who joined us. Thank you for joining us. I think it's a great story. I've known John, like we've talked about, for a very long time, and Stu for quite a while as well. So really like these guys, love the story. Obviously there's a path that they're following that's been very successful. And I think these are definitely 2 of the individuals who can make that happen. So with everyone, thank you for joining, and be safe out there.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone.